Tracy Swedlow, and this is Televisionation. I am really happy to have DevinFallon, who is from TremorVideo, and you are VP of Analytics and Media Insights.
That's correct. Thanks for having me, Tracy.
Okay, great. I was hoping I would memorize your title correctly. So,
You nailed it.
all right, thank you so much. Welcome to the show. As you can see, if you've been watching Televisionation, I'm in a slightly different location. I was trying to box a little bit here to get some exercise. If you don't know that, I do love boxing, but I screwed up my knee. So I'm lying in bed with a knee brace. Anyway, back to you, Devin. We're really happy to have you here. There's so much going on in the advertising space, the connected TV space. TremorVideo, which is TremorVideo.com, by the way, you'll see on the screen, is in the swirl of all of the change that's going on, as a lot of people are moving perhaps from linear to connected TV as everyone's streaming. But I know linear and advertising, delivery of advertising, obviously still happening. So I want to hear a little bit more about what your mandate is, what your purview is over there. And let's start talking about how connected TV is changing in this environment. And we're still in the pandemic, right? It's still going on, but we have seen, of course, viewership leveling off, perhaps, or going a little bit back to normal. But the marketplace is still transforming. So tell me a little bit about what you did there, please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff to unpack there. And first and foremost, I think you put it really well. At TremorVideo, we're really focused on helping our advertisers reach engaged audiences across any variety of digital environments, be it desktops and laptops, smartphones, tablets, or connected TV devices in any of their different forms. And as some people are aware, when we're talking about connected TV devices, we're not just talking about smart TVs. We're not just talking about streaming media players like a Roku or an Apple TV. We're talking about really any device that can connect directly to the TV or the TV itself to deliver a digital streaming signal. So that includes not only the examples I gave, but our internet-connected game consoles, and near and dear to my heart is internet-connected Blu-ray players as well, which people are always surprised still exist and are actually accounting for roughly, somewhere in the neighborhood of 19% of total connected TV streaming time. So I do like to call that out because I think it's important that you're thinking about the ecosystem as the entirety of all these different platforms, not just one or two of the most popular ones at any.
I think we've forgotten about Blu-ray players completely, I mean, I have one that's right here in front of me, but that's interesting.
Anytime I'm in a meeting, I usually ask for a show of hands. And if it's a big room, it's usually me and maybe like one other person who has one. And then I ask if they've used it in the last 12 months. Maybe they have, usually they haven't. But like I said, because there's such a wide demographic profile of connected TV viewers now, it's important to remember that those who still own and operate a Blu-ray player are probably going to look very different from a demographic perspective than the main audience pool for a Roku or a Samsung TV. So really important to be thinking holistically when we're talking about the space. As part of my work on the Media Insights and Analytics team, we're often focused with helping our sales team find the most compelling angle or tell the most compelling story to our client and agency contacts about how screens and devices like connected TV can help engage their audience. So to your point, Tracy, we already have been going through a tremendous period of change even before we start talking about the pandemic, right? Particularly as it relates to the shift from linear to connected TV, which I know you and your properties have really been on the cutting edge of for many years now, is tracking that progress.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. And what we've seen with the pandemic, as you alluded to, is a huge number of behavioral shifts. What's going to be really fascinating, I think, for all of us to see is which of those shifts rebound a bit, as you alluded to, can, kind of return back to the norm, versus which of those shifts might be here to stay. And it's hard to tell that ahead of time, but I think there's reason to believe that some of the shifts we're seeing may be longer lasting, right? So, at a high level, as I'm sure you've seen and probably spoken to other folks about, pretty much all TV has seen an increase, whether it be it linear or digital, during the pandemic, right? I think there's more people at home watching more content, right? And what we have seen when we really take an x-ray of the specific modalities of TV viewing is that as much as linear TV has increased in viewership hours, connected TV or OTT content on connected TV devices has seen an even bigger uptick as more and more people are shifting into these environments. Maybe because of some of the things that might be missing on traditional TV, like I think sports is of course a huge factor. I think conventional wisdom, feel free to disagree, but I think conventional wisdom for a lot of folks has been that sports has been one of the things that has kept a lot of people holding on to their cable and satellite packages at a time when many people are cutting the cord, right? So the expectation is when we're dealing with a sustained period of non-sports activity, there's maybe an even greater focus on looking for alternatives to lower that cable bill, even as people are going through a period of pretty heavy economic uncertainty, right, with all this unemployment.
It seems like they're looking for a richer sports offering where there's, more types of content, not just games. I think that's what's going on. And so they're turning to, these other platforms that are in place, as a connected TV app. It'd be interesting to do a full-length study about people's response to all of that content. Anyway, I'm diverging from your original point, but go ahead.
No, that's quite all right. But I agree with you. I think what we've seen in the absence of most live sports is, one, heavy sports viewers are watching a lot less content in general, although they're substituting some of their sports content with non-sports viewership. And two, the sports content that remains on the calendar is really seeing a huge viewing audience, right? So things like the NFL draft, where instead of canceling, they pivoted to basically ship AV equipment to all of their coaches and teams, as well as all the top prospects. They did the whole thing virtually, and it set a ratings record for the draft. I think because people are so starved for that content, they were happy to sit and watch a draft that maybe historically they would have watched for like 10 or 15 minutes, maybe when their team was up. Average viewership, as we saw through our partners at Alfonso, was around an hour. So a pretty heavy uptake on that type of content.
And
the other example, go ahead.
They created a lot of entertainment kind of interruptions, right? They made it TV rather than just, which I thought was interesting. Anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, it's adapting what you have to adapt, but keeping what has worked historically, right? They always tried to make a bit of a circus out of it, right? They want it to be a big event, get people excited for the return of football after the full, like 2 months off that people got from the Super Bowl. So I think they were able to successfully do that, only garner even more a share of attention because there were fewer competing sports events. The other example, which I think may have come up on your show in the past, is The Last Dance, the ESPN documentary series about Michael Jordan's last season on the Bulls. This was something that was in the works for a long time, and ESPN pushed it up a month or two to take advantage of the open slots, or really to use it as a crutch maybe for the open slots. And I believe it was by far their highest rated original piece of programming, outside of live sports. So I think, those are a couple notable examples that suggest to us that finding those sports tentpole events that still exist on the calendar is really vital to any advertiser that's trying to have that sports aligned message or reach a sports aligned audience.
I saw a demo actually the other day of somebody had made a sensor massive rich stadium and broadcast thousands of people's faces in a 3D immersive environment, and the teams could play on this virtual playing field, but for the viewer it was projecting a huge stadium experience, and there were video screens where they normally are, the jumbotrons, right? And all the advertising you could possibly want. So it gave the viewer the experience of being in a sporting environment and be able to watch from every angle, and the teams could actually play without having all of that stress of the thousands of people there. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. It was sort of interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's, even as sports come back, that is going to be a key concern, is what does the crowd look like? Is there a crowd there? Does it have to be a third of the size that it normally is? How does that affect the players? Yeah, I think those are all really fascinating issues. And I think there are probably going to be some companies and leagues that are able to lean into that adaptation and flexibility to really use it to their advantage, or at least make the best of it.
I mean, to sort of riff off what you said earlier, which was there are some things that are going to stay the same, some things that might change. And it's interesting. In some ways, what I just described will be, I predict, like an interesting hybrid experience, getting rid of the actual physical stadium. Although look what's happening in places around the United States, right? People are getting together and there's sporting events and concerts and things like this without masks. So we don't have to go into all that. But, I mean, it's interesting, like how will the advertising community potentially take advantage of sports in like that when the stadium is virtual? There aren't real people there, but there are viewers at home. But maybe I'm getting too far off your original topics. I just think it's
Well, look, I don't have an agenda. I'm happy to dive
okay.
into any of these different topics. Like I do think it's interesting the idea of you know virtual signage, virtual reality environments. Without getting too far away from what we were talking about.
Yeah.
But for us, what I think has been really helpful for our advertisers is helping them to understand what the opportunities are to still potentially align with some of this content, even as there may not be direct sponsorship opportunities. So Last Dance was one example where ESPN was pretty tight with the list of name sponsors that they were offering
Mhm.
for the run of the documentary series, and those brands I think have done really well for themselves. The ones that were able to become a part of that, because I think seems like it's about as close to water cooler talk as we can get during this pandemic, where there isn't an actual water cooler and we're not all together, right? I think if I'm thinking
I think
of
Zoom is the water cooler at the moment.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Zoom water cooler. But if I'm thinking of big cultural touch points during the pandemic, at least in terms of media and entertainment, I think the first one that comes to mind is Tiger King, which already feels like it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And then Last Dance, I think would be a close second. Not
I
just heavy
think
sports fans, but casual fans
Hamilton
too.
coming out on Disney Plus is going to be a big deal.
Yes, I think that's going to be a big one as well. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, but being able to help our advertisers understand ways that they can surround content like The Last Dance using ACR technology, automatic content recognition technology, through our partnership with Alfonso, has been a winning formula for us. Essentially, allowing us to say, brand X, you might not be directly participating in The Last Dance, but this might be a time that you're normally participating in the NBA playoffs. What if you're able to target the viewers of The Last Dance in the other environments in which we know they're consuming media? It essentially allows you to tap into that conversation, tap into that audience. You can even potentially work with some custom creative angles to maybe obliquely mention basketball or sports, so that you can make a little more of a clear connection in the mind of the viewer. So that's something that we've leaned on pretty heavily, not just for the sports angle, but for TV retargeting in general, as we know so many households are watching more TV during this
But
period.
aren't you targeting these people who are normally sports watchers to the other types of content that they're watching across all these platforms? It's not necessarily just sports.
That's correct. And we see that as a benefit, because the sports that are going on, we can still retarget and engage with that audience around other types of content. But the other thing we can do is look back historically and say, who are the people that were watching baseball last year? We know that they're not watching baseball right now. Let's see if we can find out what else they're watching, and build a plan around reaching them in those environments. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
And I know recently with the new fronts, wanted to bring that up. There's some issue about being able to reach uh, linear audiences versus connected TV audiences, and that um, they're still segmenting the teams into linear and connected TV camps. I mean, how are you helping your customers reach all of those platforms? How are you communicating to them about the ease of reach in a programmatic environment when it's still complex? And I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah, I don't think there's one easy answer, or one gold standard. But in terms of the team makeup, I'd say, dating back as long as I can remember working on connected TV, which is about 9 years or so now, there's always been a variety of approaches and team breakouts, right? So early days, we were having a lot of conversations with the linear TV teams. We were having almost as many conversations with the digital teams, and less frequently would be integrated buying teams or holistic video teams, device agnostic video teams. There's a lot of different names for it. As you might know, now that is much more the norm in terms of linear TV and digital video all flowing through one team, or at least having a subject matter expert team that sits on top and oversees all of the potential buys and strategy for these different video devices. So one of the things that's been important for us is making sure that we can tailor that message to the team with which we're speaking, because talking connected TV with a linear TV team is generally going to be a different approach than talking connected TV with a digital team in terms of the targeting we use and the outcomes we look for, right? On the linear TV side, the conversations, particularly, historically in the last couple of years, have been focused on age and gender buying demos to match up with what someone might be buying on linear TV, trying to convert to GRPs and trying to understand reach and frequency as it pertains directly to the TV buying audience, the linear TV buying audience. Go ahead.
Well, I'm curious to use the sports discussion because people are potentially right now moving a lot, away from linear to digital. Is there any sharing going on? Is there any lessons that you are able to then share to your customers about what they should be doing based on the fact that people are moving to these more digital platforms that they would be normally applying on linear?
Yeah, I do think for us, it starts with that conversation of what's the audience and what are the outcomes that they're trying to drive. So if they are still thinking in that linear TV mindset, then we're probably going to be talking about how we can reach that same age and gender audience, how we can try to measure on TV terminology, how we can compare reach that we're driving with connected TV to the linear reach. Because to be honest, and I don't think this should surprise anyone, even as all these dollars are shifting into connected TV, we're still talking about a fundamental imbalance in budget sizes, where for most brands, the lion's share of video dollars are still accruing against linear TV. And I think that's going to be the case for at least the next couple of years, right? Even as it starts to shift and get closer to an equilibrium, I think we're still looking at linear TV being the driving force of dollars. And for better or for worse, I think it's still probably
even with the cord cutting, even with the massive amount of cord cutting that's going on.
Yeah, I think so, honestly, because even as cord cutting accelerates, we're still talking about upwards of 70 million households, right? So look, maybe I'm going too far in the direction of trying to establish credibility, but I've always found it's important, coming from the digital side, to pay respect where respect is due to the linear TV teams and the linear TV budgets, right? That there are undoubtedly dollars shifting, but from my perspective, we've still seen that imbalance towards linear TV. And I would wager for a lot of brands, they're still basing their video strategy around beginning with linear TV as a building block and then adding other things on. Now that isn't necessarily the case for everyone, but I reckon that's still the case for a lot of major advertisers.
I know you guys are also providing attribution information. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? I'm very curious about the evolution of that, because it's very difficult to do accurate measurement, I think, across all of the platforms we've been discussing here, right? Mm-hmm. It is very difficult. So I'm kind of curious what your secret sauce is these days, what you're thinking, what are the challenges going ahead? Because as all audiences are shifting back and forth, you're having to potentially readjust, retweak, turbo charge. I'm kind of curious, what are the plans right now going forward for taking a control and really understanding what your audiences are doing and delivering on that kind of targeting, that kind of specificity, as when the numbers are so different than they were several months ago. Is that a fair question?
Yeah, of course. I think that's a really nice natural segue to the complement of what I was referring to with the linear TV buys, where we're generally talking about thinking like in their mindset, to the digital. And you can see I'm a big hand talker, so I'm I have my buckets on the left and the right. But on the digital side of things,
I'll box you.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
On the digital side of things, to your point, we are often dealing with teams that are more focused on mid or low funnel outcomes. So we're not just talking about reach and awareness building, although to be fair, we still hold connected TV up as first and foremost a reach and awareness building vehicle, similar to linear TV. But because of the more advanced and narrow targeting that we can apply, as you alluded to. So we're not just talking about an age and gender. We can talk about intenders. We can talk about more specific behaviors or psychographics. There's generally a sense that there's more desire to tie to these down funnel outcomes. And I completely agree with you. Historically, it's been very difficult to holistically measure something like foot traffic or site visits or offline sales lift tied back to a comprehensive connected
Or even
TV plan.
connected TV, right? Because they're not even being very forthcoming about what content is matching up with what ads, right? They're still being very secretive about that. Wouldn't you say?
Well, I think it differs on a case by case and vendor by vendor basis. Our approach has always been, we're not going to be overly reliant on the data or information we get from our individual app and device partners, because there's I think a lack of unity, to your point, in the level of information we get from each of these apps or each of these devices.
Mhm.
And if we can rely on a trusted third party who's sitting on top or next to our entire supply, we don't need to worry about registration data from app partner A versus registration data from device partner B. We're looking for a single unifier across all of those different households, if
Are you
you will.
referring,
So
are you referring to Alfonso?
this could be specific to Alfonso or with other partners with whom we work for data targeting. So they would be one of the partners with whom we would work.
And who
For
are
sure.
some of the other partners?
It really runs the gamut. LiveRamp, Experian, Oracle, pretty much, anyone who's selling data segments. We're looking for ways that we can overlay those on our connected TV audience across all of these different devices. For us, thinking back to all of the different devices I called out earlier, like our friend, the Blu-ray player, the value of the space is that we're not looking at each of these devices in isolation and saying, all right, how many cat owners do we have on Roku? We're saying, how many cat owners do we have across our entire spectrum of connected TV devices across our app partnerships and our device partnerships? That allows us to cast that really wide net. So if we're trying to hone in on a really narrow audience, we still have some semblance of scale there. And that also benefits us on the measurement side. We're looking for common unifiers across all of these different devices and platforms and households. So in some approaches, we are able to use a more traditional or more conventional tagging methodology in concert with our partners, like a Servata or like a Placed. So we've come a long way in the technical integration piece, where we're able to append those types of tags across our connected TV buys. In other cases, we're relying on things like hashed IP addresses, so anonymized IP addresses that can still be passed to a data vendor and are going to be a persistent identifier with all the PII, of course, stripped out, but still, identifying to one specific household. That has been a key to allow us to tie offline sales lift, for instance, to connected TV ad exposures. And even while we're going to tell you from a strategy perspective, connected TV might not be the single best platform for driving offline sales for a CPG brand. What's helpful for us is calling out the value that connected TV can play in conjunction with a more down funnel device like a smartphone or a tablet, right? So for us, the holy grail is, let's hit someone on the biggest screen in the household with a connected TV ad. Let's retarget them on their other devices, their more utility type devices like a phone or a computer or a tablet. And then let's see what the total benefit is or the total impact is on those down funnel metrics, like intent, like store visit, like actual offline sales.
Which platform are you getting the most success, to drive sales?
In terms of the different connected TV device categories?
Well, even linear. Is it still linear?
So linear, we can sometimes incorporate into one of our measurement solutions. Generally, we're always leading with the digital piece. And there are some times that we can bring in linear as well. I can tell you from some of the studies we've done that span linear and digital, in general, we see both platforms driving success in isolation, but usually where we see the biggest uptick is those that were exposed on both linear and a digital screen. So that's always been a key selling point for us. It's kind of like having your cake and eating it too. You can use digital to try to extend your reach by avoiding people you've already hit on linear TV. So you're right, that's just a bigger audience that you're reaching. Or conversely, you can really hone in on that audience that you've already reached on linear TV and re-message them up the frequency in a meaningful way by hitting them on multiple platforms, which has shown, not just from us, I think there's been other data in the marketplace to suggest that hitting someone with the same message on these different platforms or different types of viewing modalities tends to drive the strongest results. And we've seen that play out.
Have you done any analysis about how buying has changed, or how it's migrated to whatever platform in the sort of era of COVID, right? Because I'm assuming people are buying more online, right? That's not even something I should assume. We all know that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be kind of curious how that ties in with what they're watching now over the last few months versus what they were watching before all of this. I think that is interesting data. Right?
Yes, I agree.
Where they make that purchase, at what point, what time of day, all of the data points you need. So do you have any thoughts about that? What do you think?
Well, I think it's early for us to, I think, say definitively what the impact is going to be. We have a couple offline sales lift studies that are in the works now that have measurement periods that actually spanned pre-COVID and during COVID. So I'm curious to see if we'll be able to break out those results before and after. At the very least, we should be able to see the general trend in purchases, because these are studies that are primarily focused on offline sales, in-store sales. So to your point, I think it's going to be difficult to see with one comprehensive measurement solution that shift from offline to online. I think it's very much a real thing, and I'm not sure yet how media is going to impact that shift. I think everyone is still wrapping their heads around whether this is the new normal of going online first for the majority of their shopping.
I'd also be interested to see the difference between ads that are sensitive to the times we're in, or responding, communicating, what you can do, how to, how they're involved in taking care of their customers, versus ads that are just your usual advertisements that are out there selling the usual stuff. Because there are both of those things out there.
Yes.
I personally would be interested in that. But
so I can tell you from our colleagues at Unruly, which is a great organization that TremorVideo actually acquired earlier this year. We're very excited to have them on board, and they do a lot of work that happens to be a particular passion of mine. So I've been trying to lean in on their stuff as much as possible, because they do a lot of work to that point exactly that you were talking about, is audience.
Aren't they tracking the European market more,
they have a heavier focus in some of the international markets, yes, but they apply their work in the US as well, and it's really focused on audience perceptions of ads, audience psychology. They do a lot of audience opinions and polling. So they actually conducted a study earlier in the pandemic, after it had been going on for a few weeks, to that exact point, which is, what type of messaging do you want to hear? Is it even appropriate to hear messaging during this pandemic? And I think it's a fast moving target, because perceptions are changing on a week by week basis. But some of the overall findings that they found were that, one, people do welcome messaging that is related to COVID-19, because I think, much as we may have wanted to deny it in the middle of March, this is not going away anytime soon, right? This is the new reality that we've been living with for 3 months and are going to continue to live with for a while. It helps.
Not if you talk to my family. I keep telling them it's probably going to go on for a long time, and they're like, "Oh no, this is going to be over by November." I'm like, "I don't think so."
Where do they live?
Seattle, out here, Ohio, Michigan.
Oh, they're all over the place.
They're all over the place. So.
Yeah,
they're more optimistic. They're more optimistic about the world. I think I'm a little more realistic, so I get perceived as being, it's kind of a bummer, but I just told them, for example, and I'm getting off topic, that the first drugs that are going to come out to deal with COVID are going to be thousands of dollars. And today the news was that Remdesivir company is, offering something that maybe slightly will help you, is going to be for $3,000. Anyway, back to your topic. And they thought I was being a bummer, that when I mentioned that, but all right. Anyway,
I find myself in the same camp, Tracy, of straddling the line between optimism and, realism bordering on pessimism, which is, I'd like to think this is going to be over soon. I don't think it will. Back to the Unruly piece, right? Is it helps to acknowledge it because these are unusual times. And then to that point, what they saw was the early days of the pandemic, the thoughts and prayers, empathetic type of messaging was resonating. And that made sense, right? In the early days, people wanted to be reassured. They wanted to hear that brands cared about them. But as it's gone on, I think the pivot now has been, it's not enough to say thoughts and prayers in these trying times. Brands need to be conveying what they are doing to keep their employees safe and to keep their customers safe and to help solve these problems that no one thought they'd be facing before March, right? When you had to figure out, most of the schools are finished up now. My daughter just finished on Friday, so she's in summer mode finally. But
Wow.
how are you juggling potentially one or two parents at home working full time or dealing with being unemployed, having a kid at home that you're getting through school, financial issues? There's all these unprecedented issues that are stressing people out. So what we've seen is a real opportunity for brands, as terrible as this time is to stake out a position of leadership by saying, we know this is happening. We're not just telling you thoughts and prayers. Here are the steps we're taking to fundamentally make your life easier while you're going through some really hard stuff. Practical things, right? Curbside pickup at a store so you don't have to go in. Online ordering, being able to conduct business minimally through like human interaction. Those are the types of things that I think have resonated really well.
I saw recently a launch of a channel called House Talk TV, I think it's called,
Okay.
which sounds like what you should do, how to make this, how to do that, how to fix this. I think brands, and I was excited about that launch, which is by, well, I'll have to discuss that later, but I might put the graphic here for House Talk so people can see
Sure.
what it is. But brands should be more, I think, should be more proactive, not see themselves as just messaging, but like, as you say, more proactive, give advice, direct people to practical examples of what they can do, A, B, C, and D. I'd be actually very curious to see how brands become uh, uh, companions, or not companions, but like consultants, right? In some ways, proactive brand-oriented consultants as people navigate this stuff. Taking
Sure. Yeah.
and how you would at Tremor Video measure the differences between that brands who are able to take up that challenge versus just deliver the image-based brand display, thoughts and prayers experience.
Yeah. I think it's kind of straddling the line between advertising and branded content or branded entertainment, right? Is how do you make your
Yes.
advertising fit in a little bit better with the type of content people are consuming or the types of problems they're trying to solve. One thing that I think we've been able to do really well is leverage our amazing creative studio or in-house creative studio to help brands that don't necessarily have the resources or the budgets to completely rejigger their media campaigns or their creative campaigns on the fly. We've been able to help them take some of their pre-COVID assets and add end cards, add title cards, add additional copy to help make it a little more relevant. So that's one of the services that the creative team has been offering that I think has been very appreciated, because as we've seen, the brands that are able to be flexible and pivot their messaging really quickly seem to be the brands that are doing really well. And I can't recall who authored this research. I'll send it to you if I can find it. But there was a bit of research I was reading a couple of weeks ago about this idea that more households are trialing new brands than ever before, either due to supply chain issues, cost, and they're willing to branch out from their loyalist brands. And there seems to be some stickiness, for lack of a better term, with these new brands that people are trying during this crazy time, that they're more likely to stick with a new brand that they've tried. So this is, I'd say, really even a better than average time for challenger brands to step in and potentially earn some market share away from their larger competitor brands who might be taking a more conservative approach during the pandemic.
I think that's totally true. I mean, we're all having to do things in our homes that maybe we had hired somebody else to do, and
Mm-hmm.
or people who are, I shouldn't say all of us. There are a lot of people out there in the workplace that are, have to get outdoors, right, and have to work um, in restaurants and or you know. I can't think of the word now, but they don't get to work online all day like we do. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
not everybody wants to do that. But anyway, it's interesting to see how much we're exploring other aspects um, of these brands. I might cut that out. That was too rocky. But anyway, go
That's
ahead.
okay.
All right. Anyway, are you going to track all of that about these brands? Or, like who's picking up which brands are rising? Are you able to, do you track brands across the entire spectrum, or do you use another third-party service to do that?
Yeah, we're primarily concerned with tracking the brands that are working directly with us. That's, that's our main purview. And of course, we're supplementing the research that we're doing with our brand partners with research from the likes of eMarketer and Media Post and others, to, get a sense of the trends. That's one of the things that's been really important to me and my team as we started entering these shelter in place phases. And of course, a lot of brands completely shut down their media. As a sales supporting team, what was really important for us was, similar to the messaging that we just talked about for brands, is first is empathy and thoughts and prayers. Like, we're here for you. It doesn't matter if we're currently working together or not. Second is that here's how we're going to be a value to you, even as you might not be directly working with us. We're going to keep you up to date on COVID specific trends. We have a presentation that we call the Evolving Living Room, which is essentially an educational presentation about trends in media consumption and viewership, and advertising through the lens of connected TV. We adapted that during the pandemic with a much heavier focus on how things have changed during the pandemic and continue to change. So that's been a key focus for us. And I think it's been a way for us to maintain visibility and touch points with our agency and client partners, so that now that we're starting to get to the point where brands are wading back in, we're still top of mind, and we're able to come from a position of strength because we've been, if not holding our brands' hands the whole time, at least right there alongside them in the trenches, trying to understand what the future of the business looks like.
This is maybe a question out of left field, but are you or your brands embracing influencers more? Because there's all that dynamic content. It's always fresh. Is that part of what you guys do? Do you study how the brands are working with their influencers or not? How does that work?
Not directly. We actually do have a business called Rhythm Influence that was part of the Rhythm One acquisition, of which I was actually a part last year. So we, under the TremorVideo umbrella, we actually do have a ton of these different offerings.
You guys keep growing.
We're growing. It's a good problem to have. Yeah, this is, I've been through a couple acquisitions now, and what's been nice to see is I think these recent acquisitions are really coming from a place of power. It feels like we're more in the driver's seat and making strategic acquisitions to strengthen our portfolio more so than to survive. But yes, we do have influencer offerings. We tend to keep it a little bit siloed, so we don't focus as much on the social media aspect as we do with programming around content.
Why is that?
I think it's in theory, it's nice to aggregate it all together. I think candidly in practice, it's hard to do that really neatly. I think you're dealing with a variety of different agencies. You're dealing with a variety of different outcomes and content providers, as well as outcomes and success metrics. So we've certainly dabbled with that a bit. What we found is that in general, most brands are not yet ready to throw all that together because it's either a separate team or it's even a completely separate agency. So our perspective is we're happy to integrate those conversations. We're not going to force anyone to. And for the time being, at least from what I've seen, those are still somewhat siloed conversations. Kind of like what we were talking about, connected TV used to be fairly siloed between linear and digital. Maybe there's a little bit of a parallel there, and we're going to start to see more of a meshing between standard video advertising and social media in the future.
Well, I guess I would introduce the technology blockchain. Is that on your agenda as a unifying technology?
It hasn't been, I mean,
share data and things like that?
For me, that's been somewhat of an academic interest, trying to wrap my head around it. And I feel like every good article I read about blockchain, I feel like I understand like slightly more, but still not to the degree that I would feel really confident talking to someone about it. So it hasn't informed our decisions yet, to my knowledge. I think there's still some fundamental disconnects in how we're measuring the outcomes of those campaigns before we worry about like making sure the currency is the same, if that makes sense.
Well, we are going to actually be doing some of that at our show coming up, by the way. to draw this to a close with the TV of Tomorrow Show virtual leadership congress happening this September 9th and 10th. So just alerting you all to that exciting event coming up. But anyway, we've had a very nice long conversation. Obviously, there's so much more to discuss, but I really appreciate your sharing your insights as you are VP of Media Insights and Analytics. I guess I switched your title earlier a little bit.
You captured it all, though. It's all good.
Okay, it's all there. And I really appreciate your time and telling me what's going on. Biggest challenge, this last question, biggest challenge coming up in the next few months, next 6 months for Tremor Video. What is it?
That's funny. My first thought was making it through the summer with my family all together in one household.
Biggest challenge for you, yes.
But let's see. I think it's really going to be understanding, as you know, to go back to one of our earlier topics, understanding which audience viewership trends are going to rebound back to normal and which are here to stay, and how that's going to impact our brands as they look to ramp up. We've certainly seen brands leaning back heavily into spending to ramp up and try to make up for the dark periods that we went through in March, April, and May. So we want to make sure that we're side by side with our brands doing that in a smart, strategic way, not just telling them you got to throw money back in, right? So it's making sure that we're making the right strategic choices about targeting and about the way that we're engaging with our audiences. And that really comes down to things like TV retargeting through our ACR partnership and data-driven creative, where we can customize our message to each individual audience member. So something that's definitely high on our radar right now.
All right, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate all this. Really enjoyed speaking with you about all kinds of topics, not just advertising. So I'm wishing you and your family health and continued safety. And Tremor Video, thank you so much for participating. We always love to have you guys at our shows. And that's it. Thank you so much. Thank
you, Tracy. Get well soon.
Oh, I'll be fine. I'm just going to keep this leg brace on. All right. DevinFallon is from Tremor Video. I'm Tracy Swedlow. Please contact me. Please buy tickets. Sponsor. Contact me if you'd like to speak for our show coming up September 9th and 10th. Also, don't forget to nominate your peers for our awards for leadership in multi-platform and interactive television. You can go to tvot2leadership.com to find out about all of that, or just go to our site at tvotshow.com. And Tremor Video is tremorvideo.com. Thank you.